Following total atomic annihilation, the rebuilding of this great nation of ours may fall to you. That's why we at Vault-Tec... As you venture out into this new American frontier, you may find yourself a little lonely. Chin up there, sport.
Fallout is a series of role-playing games set in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, but to many fans it has become a home for creativity. Over the course of 24 years, Fallout developed a loyal fan base, gathering millions of players across its 9 titles. It became a platform for fans to express themselves, from creating complex machinimas to developing their very own worlds and quests. Fallout is more than just a game. It's a universe of amazing stories. Join us as we travel through this vast Nuka-Verse. Welcome to Appalachia, one of the more eye-catching wastelands you'll find here in this crumbling world. What's unique about Fallout 76's Appalachia is that it was once filled with no characters for you to interact with, only the dead. Players had to get creative and populate the world of Fallout 76 with what was missing: interesting characters and factions, one of which we'll explore today. Let's introduce you to a group of players that wanted to be the wasteland bad guys, a group that took on the role of raiders. This is the Vultures.
I had the same thoughts a lot of big Fallout fans had, was just that the potential to write your own story, especially the announcement that they made where there wouldn't be NPCs, that the other characters in the game would be controlled by other players. I just saw some really raw potential there for roleplay, and even just from a gameplay aspect, I thought it would be amazing to go through the motions Fallout game, but instead of having companions and pets and things, the people running around with the other players. Yeah, the potential was really appealing, and it was what had me excited about the game as soon as they announced it. In all the other Fallout games, I've always played as a raider, and in all the other Fallout games, they give you that avenue. Fallout 1, you can prove yourself to the boss of the Khans, and you can become a Khan, and you can play as a raider. They always give you the dialogue options, the physical options to take that path. Funny thing is the only exception to that was Fallout 4 until they released the Nuka-World DLC, which obviously allows you to become a raider overboss and fully embrace that style. So I feel like they sort of redeemed themselves with that DLC. You got to take that avenue once again. And when 76 was announced, I saw an opportunity to play that way as well, because they give you the opportunity to write your own story, but also to find like-minded people. And I remember from day one release of the game, I was posting in the Fallout 76 groups on Facebook and different social media forums looking for other like-minded players. And first person to answer the call was actually Reckless, who is to this day a Vulture boss. He's basically the first guy that came along and started talking to me about what we wanted to do, what type of raiders we wanted to play. And I feel sort of very lucky that I found the right people to sort of keep that passion for the game and the lore and the roleplay going. The Vultures is the main raider gang, modelled closely on existing sort of classic raider gangs from Fallout. There's a little bit of the Great Khans in there's a little bit of the Fiends, but we generally try and keep it as, I guess for want of a better term, like generic raider. We do have our own sort of culture behind it, and we do sort of infuse it with our own style and everything. But at the end of the day, we really embrace that raider aspect from the other Fallout games. Like, the whole overboss aspect of it comes from the fact that there are also smaller raider gangs that we basically, both lore-wise and in the game, we've conquered and absorbed those gangs, but we still sort of retain their individualities. Admittedly, being a big New Vegas fans, I take a lot of inspiration with the Vultures from that, and I know a lot of the other members of the Vultures do as well. I do like the concept of the Legion, as you say, where they just conquer and absorb. It is a big theme that's long running with Vultures, is that that's how they maintain such a powerful foothold in the grand scheme of the wasteland politics. We sort of did that to make our faction like a force to be reckoned with.
In current-day Fallout 76, PvP, or player versus player, is an element slowly fading away, with developers implementing systems to work against this style of play. In the beginning, there were lots of possibilities for players who desired that bloody Fallout experience. Survival mode brought a harsher Rust-like experience, and Nuclear Winter gave players a battle royale arena to compete in to become the last man standing. Unfortunately for the Vultures, these venues of PvP experiences were phased out, leaving the Vultures without a space of their own.
There's a lot of stuff we do. We like to go on raids when we can, and what that involves is getting however many of us there is, and we just absolutely abuse servers. Take all the workshops, do what we can, be raiders to do raider things. It's getting harder and harder to do that, especially with people's like increasingly hostile view on PvP.
A raider gang that wasn't PvP didn't make any sense. We really wanted to embrace that raider culture, and to be a raider, you have to attack other players and take their stuff. Otherwise, you're not really a raider, you're just a dude wearing raider armor. One thing that puts me off to this day about PvP and Fallout is, unless you want to like use stealth boys in a Tesla rifle, you've got no chance in a fight. And we were coming across people who were claiming to be raiders and they were fighting like that, claiming to be raiders and running around in like a pink tuxedo with a big bunny rabbit head on. And I'm just like, I don't remember ever seeing any raiders like that, you know?
I wasn't really happy with how the game changed into a more like friendly sort of atmosphere. That wasn't Fallout for me. I loved the premise of survival mode. I was of the opinion that the game should have been what survival mode was. It is a shame what happened to it, because I think a lot of PvPers lost their space. There's no real place now with Nuclear Winter going. So we'd hope for some sort of alternative where we can exist how we want to exist.
I actually made a ruling among the Vultures that we were only to play on survival. I felt like it sort of detracted from the whole concept of playing as a raider gang if we were going to play in adventure mode, when we had this alternate mode where we could be raiders. And unfortunately, as everybody knows, survival mode was eventually removed. And just slowly and surely, Bethesda have just been removing almost every aspect of PvP from the game, and it's really forced us to reallocate our goals as a community. The only real aspect of PvP left in adventure mode is workshops, but you'll still take workshops and people complain that you attack them even though they're a PvP zone. Now, Nuclear Winter is the last true dedicated PvP mode in the game, and they're getting rid of that as well.
As PvP slowly fades away, the Vultures turn to a new light in the Fallout 76 community, role-playing and creating your own lore. This rising scene brought about many groups of players that aspired to roleplay as their favourite factions, or to immerse themselves further into Appalachia. The Vultures saga of role-playing all started with Warlord taking a trip onto Facebook.
Spags from the Free States, I met through a competition he had in one of the community boards. So I won the competition, I met up in game, and he had a lot of questions for me because he was putting together his own community, and he'd seen that I'd already sort of had initial stages of the Vultures in motion, and he was sort of pretty stoked that we all played as raiders and we had a theme going and everything. Sort of started developing agreements. Sometimes like my guys would attack his guys, and he'd be like, oh, actually, can you not attack us? And we'd be like, oh, sorry, man, didn't realize you guys were together. And he basically became our exclusive supplier for 3-star legendary raider gear that nobody wanted. And because of that, we sort of protected him and protected his people. Then we had a really big event within the Vultures where, due to some personal disagreements, my second in command basically turned on me. and sort of led a sort of insurrection. He wanted to take over, and it sort of split the Vultures down the middle. He had his followers, I had my followers. We engaged in a really brutal sort of PvP battle that just went on back and forth for a couple of months, where anytime we would come online, they would know where we hang out, they would know who we'd be with. It was a really brutal time. Like, it almost destroyed the Vultures. It was something we often refer to as our civil war. And during that time, Bobby stuck by me, and the Free States basically pledged their support to us, and it formed a very real and long-running alliance. And that's about the time the 5-0 put out a press release saying that they were looking for a legitimate roleplay raider group to start doing interactive quests with and that sort of thing. Yeah, so we met up, and there was a lot of distrust at first. Like, being a raider gang, we'd made a lot of enemies, and just dealing with griefers and people who want to start trouble, people who want to make a name for themselves. We were just pleasantly surprised because they were on the level and they were legit about everything, and they showed us to the world. They gave us so much coverage. Once we started doing stuff with them, we were getting Polygon articles written about us, and people were featuring us in their podcast stuff because we have such a close relationship with those guys that you're going to talk to them, you're going to hear about us because we all work so closely together.
The Fallout 5-0 were the cops to the Vultures' robbers, a perfect yin and yang of the wasteland. The two groups began collaborating on lore and roleplay, setting up in-game events and battles to determine the outcome of their shared 76 story. One of these notable events was the Battle of Big Bend, which unexpectedly shot the 5-0 and the Vultures straight into the spotlight.
It's been almost a year since that day. The Battle of Big Bend Tunnel.
We had the initial Battle of Big Bend, and that was the big one that kind of set the tone of everything, where we agreed to show up at this tunnel, non-legendary weapons. It was very organized, and we fought, and the outcome of the battle determined the lore, and we kept that sort of thing for a lot of our lore decisions. We'd have them affected directly by the gameplay. I think that all started from Ray and Lucy, to be honest with you. Because we did the battle, and we knew it was going to be filmed and the outcome would be shown to people. But we had never thought that it would spiral into a story.
Ray was the driving force behind that whole concept, and for the initial stages of our relationship between our factions, that was really how we were going about it. Big Bend Tunnel was the first example of it, but we had about 4 or 5 big battles, and whatever happened in that battle determined what happened in the lore. Some of the ideas were used, some of them weren't, but that was how we approached everything, and that was really Ray's idea. He had this quest he was doing for the 5-0, where they were looking for a virus that would disable Modus, the Enclave computer. This is the idea behind the battle, was his guys were searching for this virus. They had intel that it was within Big Bend Tunnel. Meanwhile, the Vultures had noticed the 5-0 cleaning up the wasteland and taking out raiders and that sort of thing, so had staged an ambush. And also with the idea of also preventing them from finding this virus, just as be a pain in the ass to the good guys, basically. But Ray had approached us when he came to us with the idea for the battle, was that let's have a fair above board battle. There were all these rules set up, and it was a very organic fight. The giant Sinclair, who's one of the Vulture bosses, he's got a reputation for being one of the best PvPers in the game. And before we started, I consulted with him about how we're going to approach this. To me, it's what we should do is we should get a sniper who's not going to be involved in the firefight. We should get him to take an empath serum. And what that will do is that will greatly reduce his defensive capabilities, but it will vastly buff ours. And I was like, okay, well, that's one way to look at it. And I spoke to the sniper guy, and he was like, oh, I don't know about taking a serum that's going to drop my defensive capabilities down.
Kill every motherfucking one of them!
We fought so hard, and we're in there, we're throwing Molotov cocktails, and we're all just exchanging fire in this brutal skirmish where, you know, a couple of times we just jump out and just launch on these guys, but we just weren't doing any damage. At the time, I was running a critical commando build, and you can see there's points where I'm dropping 5, 6 critical hits on these guys, and their energy's just going down like this, but then their health is popping straight back up again.
You've seen a monster.
What are your orders? Take him down. Because there's crazy motherfucker. Commander, we have one in custody. He'll need medical attention.
In the end, they beat us, and we consulted with them afterward. I said, what were you guys running? Like, that was insane. We were just throwing everything we had at you. And they're like, well, what we did is we had one of our guys take an empath serum, and what that did, and I was just like, oh my God. We didn't lose a single fight with the 5-0 after that. Every time we had a battle with them, we learned from our mistakes. So
After the Battle of Big Bend, an idea was sparked to further the story of the Warlord as he was held prisoner by the 5-0. This led the Vultures & Co. to entering the world of machinima with The Trial of the Warlord.
The state of West Virginia versus the Warlord for crimes against humanity, mutilation, theft, and murder.
that was something I contributed to the ongoing storyline. It was directly after the Battle for Big Bend Tunnel. We were taking photos just to sort of commemorate the event and the introduction of the Vultures to 5-0. And we had this photo where I was like, hey, I got this idea where you can have the Warlord in the middle and have the 5-0 guys surrounding the Warlord with guns raised, you know what I mean? And then I said to Ray, like, you know, that would actually be a very cool idea. If you want to keep this going, if we want to keep the story going, why not have the 5-0 capture the Warlord? He can be imprisoned by them, and that way that'll sort of create this sort of binding link between our factions where we have to keep coming up with stories. From both of our perspectives, it was just a much more interesting story to have the Warlord held prisoner. It sort of holds the whole communal law that we've written in place together. That's why the Vultures just can't come and ambush and assassinate the 5-0 leaders or anything like that. They have the Warlord prisoner, and that's why the 5-0 are sort of under constant threat of Vultures, because they've got their leader. It was an idea that sort of got out of hand, but at the same time, I'm glad we wrote it that way. And in order to keep the story going, like, yeah, I've made those sacrifices for the Warlord, so it was my idea to have him in prison. It was my idea to have Bandit Town nuked by the Enclave. It was a way to write that into our story. At the time, the Earl quests had just started, where Monogar Mine was regularly being nuked, and where I had Bandit Town, which was at the time the main city of the Vultures, was right in that nuke zone, so I had to move my camp.
So in the lead up to one of the upcoming videos, we kind of realized that the Vultures hadn't lost enough, and there needed to be some more stakes. Like, why would the Enclave appear without doing anything? They needed to have an entrance, and the only decision we came to was, we have to lose our fucking city, don't we? So they ended up nuking the city, which gave rise to a lot of lore opportunities and gave rise to the entire stronghold system to be formed, because suddenly the Vultures didn't have one power base. They're fragmented, and that caused all these different ones to rise. The Cave Lord's one is called Áit Faoirse, and in Irish that means forest place, but it is sort of a tribal, cronnog-filled swamp village, and all of it's reflected, so everyone there is wearing woad. They're all using engraved weaponry, copper spearheads, all of that sort of stuff. It's an extension of what they are, and the gangs then are extensions of it.
The Vultures and their fellow role-playing groups found themselves headlining many articles over the internet. Ever since the first Machinima, the Vultures have continued working with the 5-0 on many productions, one example being Redemption Fall, a full drama series taking place in Vault 76 before the events of the game. Before we wrapped up our talks with the Vultures, we wanted to ask where they would be going, and if they are confident in the future of a more friendly Fallout 76.
I wouldn't say I'm confident with it, but I'm not too overly negative about it either. Like, there's a lot of things I would have changed and a lot of things I wouldn't have done. But I have faith that whatever we do get will be workable and we'll still be able to do what we want to do.
Look, I don't want to be that guy, but I feel somewhat disappointed by where Bethesda's taken this game. I feel like in a lot of ways, Bethesda's given up on 76. They seem to be very distant in terms of their additions of DLCs. And I know there's more DLCs coming up and everything, but there's just so many basic things in the game that are horribly glitched, and there's some really nasty faults in the game that they just seem to be unwilling or unable to fix. I think they spend far too much time on trying to sell us cosmetics. Like, you notice there's never a problem with their atomic shop stuff. Like, that stuff is always perfectly coded and on point, and if there is a problem that pops up with something, they'll very quickly fix that. Whereas like pretty vital aspects of the game that just keep becoming a problem are just left ignored. And the big thing for me recently with Bethesda and the game itself is the fact that by Bethesda going across to Microsoft and Xbox, it makes me very doubtful that they're going to release any future Fallout titles on the Sony, and which means that I think as a Sony player, I'm probably going to be left out of a lot of the future developments in the games. That sort of creates a very negative view for me of where the future of this game is for me. And it's kind of sad. I think, you know, I'm a long-running Fallout player and I'll always be a fan of the franchise and I'll always love the series. But I just feel like it's slowly dying. And I mean, don't get me wrong, the Vultures are going to be there to the end and we'll die with it. But unfortunately, Bethesda hasn't given me a lot to work with in terms of what the future of the game's going to be for us. So we've definitely reached a level where we've built a solid foundation. We've managed through trial and error to find a hierarchy and a system and a set of rules and a form of governance that works for us. And yeah, I think the main goal is just to go where the game takes us. And I think content creation is a big part of that. We have a lot of role players and lore writers in the faction now. We have people making their own videos. We've got certain members of the group that just really specialize in certain things. I guess there's no real central goal that we're working towards. I think we've achieved what we wanted to come out and do with this game. We've built a fully functioning raider gang. Feel like we represent ourselves pretty well. We stay true to our demographic of people who want to play as raiders and keep that raider culture alive in the multiplayer format. And we're just going where it takes us. And I think we're going to be around for as long as the game and as long as the community's around. So, you know, we're just going to keep doing our thing.
The story of the Vultures is one of many in the Fallout universe, and there are still so many to be told. Get ready for a full season of short documentaries based on the wonderful Fallout tales. I'll see you all in the next episode of Nuka-Verse.